I am sitting by my window this Thanksgiving morning watching the neighbors across the street setting up their dinner table through their lit windows. Children laughing, parents embracing grandparents, sharing stories. For a moment, I wonder what it feels like to have that kind of family warmth. Mine looks perfect from the outside, too. My parents have 2 daughters. My older sister Madison was always the golden child, beautiful and brilliant. But behind closed doors, she harbors dark secrets that nearly destroyed me. Before I share what really happened in my childhood, please let me know where you are watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button to support me. Because what I am about to tell you will help you understand why some boundaries should never be crossed, even for family. Growing up in our suburban Ohio home, everything seemed picture perfect to outsiders. My father worked as a regional manager for a manufacturing company while my mother taught elementary school. We had a 2-story house with a white picket fence, exactly what the American dream promised. Madison, 6 years older than me, was everything parents could want in a daughter. She excelled in school, played piano beautifully, and had this angelic smile that made adults instantly adore her. From my earliest memories, I worshipped Madison. She was tall and graceful with long blonde hair that caught the sunlight when she walked. Teachers constantly praised her intelligence. Neighbors would stop my mother on the street to compliment how well-behaved and mature Madison was. My parents beamed with pride whenever anyone mentioned her name. She was destined for great things, they said. She was special. But when adults were not watching, Madison was different. I remember being 2 or 3 years old, toddling after her around the house, desperate for her attention. She would play with me sometimes, but her games were always rough. She would grab my arms too tightly, leaving small bruises that she claimed happened when I fell. She would push me just hard enough to make me stumble, then help me up with that sweet smile before anyone noticed. One afternoon when I was 4, she was watching me while our parents went grocery shopping. She convinced me to play hide and seek in the basement. The basement was dark and cold, filled with storage boxes and the old furnace that made scary noises. Madison helped me find the perfect hiding spot behind the water heater, then left me there. I waited and waited, calling her name softly at first, then louder as fear crept in. The basement seemed to grow darker and more frightening with each passing minute. When I finally climbed the stairs crying and found her watching television in the living room, she looked annoyed. She told me I was being a baby and that good little sisters do not ruin games by coming out of hiding too early. When our parents returned and found me sobbing, Madison explained that I got scared during our innocent game of hide and seek. She hugged me close and told them she tried to comfort me, but I was just being overly sensitive. The pattern continued as I grew older. Small incidents that could always be explained away. I would end up with mysterious bruises or scratches that Madison attributed to my clumsiness. Once when I was 5, I woke up with a small burn on my hand. When I cried and showed my mother, Madison quickly explained that we had been playing doctor, and I accidentally touched the ashtray where our father left his cigarette butts. She demonstrated how I must have reached for it despite her warnings, her face full of concerned innocence. My mother scolded me for not listening to Madison and praised my sister for trying to keep me safe. That became the story everyone believed. Madison was the responsible older sister trying her best to protect her careless little sister. I was the problem child who caused accidents and needed constant supervision. The most significant incident happened during that same year. Our parents had gone out for their anniversary dinner, leaving Madison in charge. She was 11 and considered mature enough to babysit for a few hours. I was excited because Madison had promised we would play a special game. She set up a pretend doctor office in her bedroom, complete with her toy medical kit and some real supplies she had taken from the medicine cabinet. She told me I was very sick and needed special medicine that only she could give me. She made me lie still on her bed while she examined me with her toy stethoscope. Then she reached into the ashtray on her nightstand where our father had left a cigarette butt from earlier that day. The tip was still warm, though not glowing. She told me this was a special kind of medicine that doctors used to make sick children better. Before I could react, she pressed the warm end against the back of my hand. The pain was immediate and shocking. I screamed and tried to pull away, but she held my arm firmly. She told me to stop being a baby, and that medicine sometimes hurt before it made you feel better. When I continued crying, she finally let go and started crying herself. By the time our parents returned home, Madison was sobbing and telling them how I had tried to play with cigarettes despite her warnings. She said I grabbed one from the ashtray and burned myself before she could stop me. She was so upset that she had failed to protect me. My burn was small but visible, and my parents were more concerned about punishing me for playing with dangerous items than questioning Madison's version of events. When I tried to tell them what really happened, my mother accused me of lying to avoid getting in trouble. She said I should be grateful to have such a caring sister who tried to keep me safe. I was sent to my room without dinner while Madison received comfort and praise for being so responsible in a difficult situation. That night, lying in my bed with my bandaged hand throbbing, I started to understand that something was very wrong. But I was only 5 years old and had no words for what was happening to me. All I knew was that Madison scared me, but nobody would believe me when I tried to explain why. As we moved into our school years, the dynamic in our house became even more pronounced. Madison flourished in middle and high school, maintaining perfect grades while participating in multiple extracurricular activities. She joined the cheerleading squad, played violin in the orchestra, and volunteered at the local animal shelter. She was the student body treasurer and won academic awards every semester. My parents proudly displayed her achievements on the refrigerator and mantelpiece. Meanwhile, I struggled to find my place anywhere. My grades were average at best, and I felt awkward and uncomfortable in most social situations. Teachers would often mention how different I was from my brilliant older sister, usually in ways that made me feel inadequate. My parents constantly used Madison as an example of what I should aspire to become. The abuse escalated during this time, becoming more sophisticated and psychological. Madison learned exactly which buttons to push to hurt me most effectively. She would wait until I was feeling particularly vulnerable, then swoop in with carefully crafted cruelty. If I was excited about a small achievement, she would find ways to diminish it. If I was struggling with something, she would make sure I felt even worse about my failures. She became an expert at isolating me socially. In 8th grade, when I finally started making friends with a group of girls in my art class, Madison began spreading subtle rumors about me. She would mention to their older siblings that I was weird at home, that I made up stories for attention, that I was mentally unstable. Within weeks, my new friends began avoiding me, and I never understood why until much later. The physical abuse became less frequent, but more calculated. Madison would find moments when we were completely alone and use them to remind me of my powerlessness. She would grab my arm and twist it just hard enough to cause pain without leaving marks. She would push me into walls when we passed in the hallway, then immediately ask loudly if I was okay, drawing attention to my apparent clumsiness. When I was 13, I started keeping a diary where I wrote about everything Madison did to me. I thought that if I could document the incidents, maybe someone would eventually believe me. Writing became my only outlet for the confusion and pain I carried. I hid the diary in my closet underneath a pile of old stuffed animals I never played with anymore. Madison found it within a week. I came home from school one day to find her sitting on my bed, reading my most private thoughts out loud in a mocking voice. She laughed at my descriptions of her cruelty and told me I had quite an imagination for someone so stupid. Then she tore out the pages and ripped them into small pieces while I watched. She leaned close to me and spoke in a whisper that sent chills down my spine. She told me that if I ever told anyone about our private conversations or wrote down lies about her again, she would make sure I disappeared. She said our parents loved her more than me anyway, and if anything happened to me, they would get over it quickly. But if I caused problems for her, she would make my life so miserable that I would wish I had never been born. Over the next few months, Madison systematically destroyed my self-esteem. She convinced me that I was worthless, that everything wrong in our family was my fault, that I was a burden everyone would be better off without. She had years of practice manipulating me, and she used every technique she had learned. She would be sweet and sisterly when others were around, then cruel and threatening when we were alone. The psychological pressure became unbearable. I began having trouble sleeping, losing weight, and falling further behind in school. My parents noticed my declining performance and emotional state, but they attributed it to typical teenage difficulties. When they suggested I talk to someone, Madison quickly volunteered that I had been acting out for attention lately, and that professional help might just encourage my dramatic tendencies. Eventually, the emotional pain became so overwhelming that I started cutting myself. It began with small scratches on my arms that I could hide under long sleeves. The physical pain was easier to deal with than the emotional torture Madison inflicted daily. At least when I hurt myself, I had some control over the pain. Madison discovered my cutting within days. Instead of being horrified or concerned, she seemed pleased. She told me I was finally doing something right for once. She said I was acknowledging what she had always known to be true, that I was damaged and destructive. She encouraged me to continue suggesting different methods and locations where the marks would be less visible. When my mother eventually noticed the cuts on my arms, Madison was ready with an explanation. She tearfully told our parents that she had been trying to help me through a difficult phase, but I was engaging in attention-seeking behavior that she did not know how to handle. She said she was worried about me, but did not want to betray my confidence by telling them sooner. Instead of getting me professional help, my parents grounded me and took away my privileges. They said I was old enough to know better than to engage in such destructive behavior. Madison received praise for being such a caring sister who tried to protect me even when I was acting out against her. The day I turned 18, I made a decision that would change everything. I had earned a partial scholarship to a university in California, and I had been working part-time jobs since I was 16 to save money for expenses my scholarship would not cover. The night before I left for college, I lay in my childhood bed for the last time, knowing I would never voluntarily return to this house. College was like stepping into an entirely different world. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who did not know my family history or have preconceived notions about who I was supposed to be. I could reinvent myself completely. I threw myself into my studies, made friends who genuinely cared about me, and slowly began to heal from years of psychological damage. During my sophomore year, I started seeing a counselor at the campus health center. Initially, I went because I was having trouble sleeping and concentrating on my coursework. But as I began talking about my childhood, the counselor helped me understand that what I had experienced was not normal sibling rivalry. It was systematic abuse that had been enabled by my parents' willful blindness. For the first time, someone believed me. The counselor validated my memories and helped me understand that nothing Madison had done to me was my fault. I learned about family dynamics, golden child syndrome, and scapegoating. I realized that my entire family system had been built around preserving Madison's perfect image at the expense of my well-being. Meanwhile, Madison was thriving in her adult life just as she had in childhood. She attended Harvard, as my parents had always predicted, graduated with honors, and married a wealthy lawyer from Connecticut. They had 2 children and lived in a sprawling house in an exclusive neighborhood. My parents constantly bragged to neighbors and relatives about Madison's success, her beautiful children, and her perfect marriage. On social media, Madison's life looked like something from a magazine. Professional photos of her family at holiday gatherings, vacation pictures from exotic destinations, images of her volunteering at charity events. She had become everything my parents always wanted in a daughter. She was their proof that they had succeeded as parents. But even though I had moved across the country and cut off all regular contact, Madison still found ways to reach me. She would send private messages through social media emails, from fake accounts, and sometimes even letters to my apartment. The content was always the same venomous cruelty she had displayed throughout our childhood, just delivered through different methods. She told me that I would never escape what I really was, that everyone I met would eventually see through my act and realize I was damaged goods. She said she could destroy my new life anytime she wanted by telling my friends and professors about my history of mental health problems and self-harm. She reminded me that our parents still loved her more and always would. When I was 25 and had been living independently for 7 years, my parents called me for the first time in months. They told me that Madison was planning a family reunion for our grandmother's 80th birthday, and everyone was expected to attend. They said it was time for me to stop being dramatic and come home to celebrate with the family. I tried to explain that I could not be around Madison, that being in the same room with her was harmful to my mental health. I had worked too hard to build a stable life to risk destroying it by reopening old wounds. My mother dismissed my concerns as typical overreaction and said I needed to grow up and move past childhood disagreements. My father was more direct. He said Madison was a successful mother and wife who had outgrown any childish behavior from the past. He told me I was being selfish by holding grudges, and that family was more important than whatever perceived slights I was still nursing. He said I owed it to my grandmother to put aside my differences with Madison for one weekend. When I continued to refuse, they escalated their pressure tactics. They called my relatives to complain about my stubbornness, hoping social pressure would convince me to change my mind. They sent guilt-inducing emails about how disappointed my grandmother would be if I did not attend her birthday celebration. They even threatened to cut off the minimal financial support they occasionally provided for emergencies. The breaking point came when Madison herself called me directly. It had been years since I heard her voice, and the sound of it immediately transported me back to childhood terror. But I was no longer a helpless child, and I had learned enough about recording calls to capture our entire conversation. Madison's voice was as sweet and manipulative as ever as she began the call. She told me how much she missed me and how sad she was that we had grown apart. She said becoming a mother had given her new perspective on family relationships, and she wanted to repair the damage between us. She suggested that maybe I had misunderstood her intentions when we were children, that everything I remembered was probably just normal sibling rivalry blown out of proportion in my mind. But when I did not immediately agree to attend the family reunion, her mask slipped completely. The venom in her voice was exactly what I remembered from our childhood. She told me I was still the same pathetic attention-seeking loser I'd always been. She said she had built a beautiful life while I was still wallowing in self-pity about things that happened decades ago. Then she said something that revealed everything I needed to know about who she really was underneath her perfect facade. She told me I had deserved everything that happened to me because I was weak and disgusting. She said she had actually been helping me by teaching me early what the world would do to people like me. She claimed credit for making me stronger through her cruelty, as if her abuse had been some kind of gift. The most chilling part was when she threatened my future. She said if I ever came back and tried to disrupt her perfect family image, she would make sure her children knew what kind of psychopath their aunt really was. She would tell everyone about my history of self-harm and mental health problems. She would destroy any relationships I tried to build by revealing what a damaged and unreliable person I was. But this time, I had evidence. I had recorded every word of her confession and threats. I finally had proof that I was not crazy, that I had not imagined or exaggerated our childhood dynamic. Madison had revealed her true nature in her own voice with her own words. After she hung up, I sat in my apartment feeling a mixture of vindication and heartbreak. Part of me was relieved to finally have validation of everything I'd experienced. But another part of me grieved for the family I'd always wanted, but never actually had. I called my parents that evening and played them the entire recorded conversation. I thought surely now they would understand what Madison was really like. I thought they would finally believe me and maybe even apologize for all the years they had failed to protect me. Instead, they accused me of manipulating the recording somehow. My mother said I must have provoked Madison into saying those things, that I probably edited out whatever cruel things I had said to her first. My father claimed the recording was taken out of context, and that Madison was probably just defending herself against my accusations. Even when confronted with undeniable evidence of Madison's cruelty, they chose to protect her rather than acknowledge what they had allowed to happen to me. They said I was jealous of Madison's success and trying to destroy her reputation with lies and manipulation. That was the moment I realized my parents would never change. They had invested too much in maintaining Madison's perfect image to ever admit they had failed to protect their other daughter. Their love was conditional based on how well we fit into their idealized version of family success, and I had never measured up to their standards. I told them I would only return to that house when Madison either died or moved out permanently. Since they continued to choose her over my safety and well-being, they were both dead to me as well. I hung up and blocked their numbers, just as I had blocked Madison's years earlier. The immediate aftermath of cutting contact with my entire birth family was both liberating and terrifying. For weeks, various relatives called and emailed, trying to guilt me into reconciling. They used every manipulation tactic they could think of, from claiming my grandmother was heartbroken to suggesting I was mentally unstable and needed professional help. But I had learned enough about healthy boundaries to recognize these attempts for what they were. I changed my phone number, moved to a new apartment, and blocked every family member on social media. For the first time in my life, I was completely free from their toxic influence. The healing process was not immediate or easy. I spent 2 years in intensive therapy working through decades of accumulated trauma. I learned about complex post-traumatic stress disorder and how childhood abuse affects brain development. I practiced techniques for managing anxiety and depression that had plagued me since elementary school. Slowly, I began building what therapists call a chosen family. I developed deep friendships with people who valued honesty, kindness, and mutual respect. I found mentor figures who provided the guidance and support my parents should have given me. I learned to trust my own perceptions and feelings instead of constantly questioning whether I was being too sensitive or dramatic. When I was 30, I met Alex at a work conference. He was kind, patient, and genuinely interested in understanding my background without judging me for it. When I eventually told him about my family situation, he listened without trying to fix anything or convince me to give them another chance. He simply accepted that I had made the best decision for my mental health and supported my choice completely. We married 2 years later in a small ceremony surrounded by our closest friends. My wedding day was everything I had dreamed it could be, filled with people who loved and supported us both. I felt no sadness about my birth family's absence because I was surrounded by people who had chosen to be there for me. Now, at 32, I have built a life that feels authentic and peaceful. I work in marketing for a nonprofit organization that supports survivors of childhood abuse. My job allows me to use my experiences to help others while maintaining healthy boundaries around my own healing process. Alex and I are discussing starting our own family, and I feel confident that I can break the cycle of dysfunction that defined my childhood. I have learned what healthy love looks like, what real family support feels like, and how to create the kind of safe home I always wished I had. I still occasionally think about my birth family, usually when I see heartwarming stories about siblings or multi-generational gatherings. But the ache I used to feel has been replaced by gratitude for my escape and pride in my resilience. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away from people who refuse to treat you with basic human dignity. Real family protects you and supports your well-being. They do not sacrifice your safety for appearances or convenience. I stopped waiting for apologies that would never come and started writing my own story instead. Some bridges are meant to be burned, and from their ashes you can build something much better. I am living proof that you can survive a toxic family and create the loving relationships you deserve, even if you have to build them with people who share no blood relation with you at all. If you have experienced similar family dynamics, please know that you are not alone and that your perceptions are valid. Have you had to make difficult decisions about toxic family members? Let me know in the comments below how you found the strength to prioritize your own well-being. Please like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more stories about overcoming difficult family situations, and share this with anyone who might need to hear that they deserve better than abuse disguised as love. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you all the courage to create the peaceful life you deserve.